Okay, right. Move on to a different subject. One of the other major parts of the Secretary of State's announcement was the withdrawal of the Consolidated Advice Note, and then the new guidance, PAS 9980, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Right, so Secretary of State was really saying this is going to be a more proportionate, more common sense view, and a lot less use of EWS1 forms. Is that your view about what is going to happen? Richard Collins, let's ask you first, and then I'll come over to Charles Rowe.
Thank you. So I think firstly we need to recognise that the government should be congratulated initially for bringing in the Consolidated Advice Note. It was left in a very difficult position post-Grenfell, and it moved quickly with industry experts to produce a body of guidance to help all parts of the industry. I think it's also right that that's now been replaced by a well-worked-through standard, PAS 9980, which RICS and a number of others in the industry have contributed to. I don't think this will lead to a reduction in the number of EWS1 forms for a couple of reasons. So let me just explain. The EWS1 process was introduced jointly by RICS, UK Finance, the Building Societies Association, post-Grenfell, because what we could all see was a danger of the whole market for residential flats in high-rise buildings being blighted. Obviously, there was a lot of concern about, are these buildings safe? And there was a real risk that perfectly safe buildings, perfectly safe flats would be blighted because people just didn't know whether high-rise buildings were safe or had fire risks. So what we did collectively was introduce the EWS1 process so that when a lender was contemplating lending on a flat, the valuer could look at the block and make an assessment. Does this block, on the face of it, appear to be safe? It has no cladding. Or is there something about the block which gives rise to concern, i.e. I can see that it has an external cladding system on it? What the EWS1 form does, in those circumstances, it enables a trained fire safety assessor to come and look at the building and give an opinion about whether remediation work is needed or not. So what the process has enabled, it's enabled the very many thousands of flats which are perfectly safe still to be operate within an open market. The use of EWS1 has declined over the period. I think the most recent figures I saw were something like just over 5% of flats being subject to EWS1, and in low-rise flats I think that's more like 2%. But we think the EWS1 form process will continue for as long as there continue to be concerns about high-rise buildings being unsafe. PAS 9980 quite rightly introduces a much broader fire safety assessment process, but that's actually much lengthier and will take more work to complete. So we think what is actually the slightly simpler EWS1 process, which looks at cladding, will continue and is in the benefit of all parts of the market. I think it has broad support from lenders, from valuers and from conveyancers. We absolutely don't want to see EWS1s being used where they're not needed, but we think the evidence suggests that's not happening at the moment.
Charles?
Thank you, yes. So UK Finance and our members use the EWS1 form and process in a very proportionate way. As Richard said, the use of the EWS1 has reduced over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. Government's own figures that were published at the beginning of the year indicate that overall the EWS1 is used in less than 10% of property valuations these days. And so on low-rise buildings, so those buildings below 11 metres, it's used in less than 2% of valuations. So a proportionate approach is being adopted. The main benefit of the EWS1 for the lending community is that it's a relatively short document. It's about 5 pages long, and it provides a binary output, a yes or no output, for the valuation industry and for lenders to understand whether a building has cladding on it which could have an impact on that building's value. And lenders are concerned in terms of two elements. One, in relation to the value of the property that they're lending against, and secondly, in relation to any additional costs that the purchaser or leaseholder may entail when they're purchasing that property. So they have to lend responsibly, which is a requirement of the FCA and also the PRA. So lenders have worked with government on PAS 9980, which is basically a methodology for assessing the external wall systems on high-rise buildings and in blocks of flats. That PAS 9980 will then feed through into the fire risk assessment document, which will be completed by specific individuals in either an industry or in terms of appointed by the landlord of the property. Those FRAs are going to take some years to be completed to ensure that all properties, despite the fact that the government is recommending a proportionate approach is taken to those properties that are high rise, will take a number of years to get those FRAs completed. So in the interim, lenders will continue to use EWS1s to assess the valuation and also to provide the comfort to leaseholders and flat purchasers whether their building has cladding on it or whether they may entail some additional costs in relation to that.
That sort of chimes with the evidence we had the other day. So basically you're saying that fire risk assessments will have to be done eventually for all buildings, and it's going to be a long process of getting them done. Therefore, in the meantime, you're saying the EWS1 forms are needed for certain buildings of higher risk. To give security for lenders. That's what you're saying to see.
That's correct. Ideally, what we would like from the FRA is a binary output from that. So does this building have value-affecting works that need to be remediated? At the moment, that document is expected to be about 70 pages long, and it doesn't have that binary output, which lenders would ideally like from the point of view of saying, does that property have value-affecting works?
So the process could be more complicated rather than less.
From the point of view of a valuation perspective, yes, but from the point of view of a landlord and a freeholder, then it provides a greater degree of comfort for them in terms of an assessment of the whole of the building in relation to fire risk assessment.
Collins, anything to add?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking to me. Sorry, James. No, just completely agree with Charles. And it is an issue that both valuers, RICS and UK Finance have worked very closely on to try to keep the market operating effectively.
No change. Right, okay. One of the concerns that we did raise at the committee before, or raised with us, was that there are occasions where it is deemed that an EWS1 form is not needed, but then the lenders wouldn't lend because there wasn't one. Have we got over that problem?
There were some initial teething problems with this, and it is a complex issue that we have been working on with lenders, with the valuation community, and also with officials at DLUHC. We have a very open dialogue with members at DLUHC and also with parliamentarians and MPs. And where instances are brought to our attention where there seems to be any confusion in relation to whether an EWS1 is required or not, we investigate those on a individual basis with the lender to understand the reasons behind it. Lenders actually aren't the ones that are requesting an EWS1. When the valuation is undertaken, the valuation firm will assign one of their valuers to the property. The property will do that valuer will do an initial assessment of it. If it seems to that valuer that that building has an external wall cladding system on it that could be flammable or meets the standards required for an EWS1, they will then request a fire risk assessor to do a review of that building. So it's outside of the control of the lenders, but it is down to the valuers and their interpretation of what's on the outside of that building.
The Secretary of State was quite clear that he was following the independent expert panel's advice, expecting that EWS1 forms generally wouldn't be used under the buildings under 18 metres. Yeah. That's not going to, you're saying it, but it's still going to happen, but you're still going to require them.
We welcome that advice that came from the fire experts and the independent experts panel last July. The advice that they gave was talking about life risk and fire safety risk. Whilst that's important and lenders need to make sure that householders and purchasers have a property that's safe to live in, what lenders are concerned with, as well as life safety and fire safety, is also in terms of valuation risk. Because it's not in anybody's interest for a lender to advance funds to somebody to purchase a property, to find out later down the line that they may face a cladding remediation bill of £40,000 or £50,000, which would affect their affordability to repay their mortgage, or in terms of unexpected costs coming through. So we will be using EWS1s in a very limited number of cases going forward. As the figures have shown, that the numbers of cases that we are using them in is reducing.
Just finally on this point, before I move on to the next set of questions, have we got to a point now where these the assessments as part of EWS1 are being doing more quickly? Because for some time it was we haven't got the people to do it, we haven't got the experts to come and do these assessments, so that's what the delay is. Are we in a better place with that now?
We are in a much better place in terms of where we were. One of the things that the lending industry has been very keen to do is to make sure that when an EWS1 is undertaken, that document is available to other lenders within the industry or for other householders. So what the lending industry have done, in conjunction with the Fire Industry Association, is they have developed a portal, and they've paid, the lenders have paid for the portal to be developed by the FIA for all EWS1s to be loaded onto. And that portal, when they're all loaded on there, will be accessible to households, leaseholders, freeholders, government departments, so that people can benefit from the EWS1s that have been completed. And it's a completely transparent process.
So if the flat next door comes up, then the EWS1 form already done on the first flat